The music in the grand obsidian ballroom didn't just fade, it was strangled into silence. 300 of New York's elite titans of industry tech moguls and old money dynasties collectively held their breath. Ethan Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, froze mid-laugh, his champagne glass tilting dangerously in his hand. He had been waiting for the arrival of Julian Thorpe, the reclusive billionaire who held the fate of Ethan's failing company in his hands. But when the mahogany doors swung open, it wasn't just Julian who stepped onto the red carpet. Clinging to the billionaire's arm draped in emerald silk that cost more than Ethan's house was a woman. She looked like a queen returning from exile. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. It was Sarah, the wife he had discarded like trash 2 years ago, the woman he thought was broken, the woman who now looked at him not with love or even hate, but with the cold, terrifying amusement of an executioner. The rain battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the law firm Pendleton and Associates on the 45th floor, blurring the Manhattan skyline into a smear of gray and charcoal. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was colder than the storm outside. Sarah Vance sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap, the knuckles white, contrasting sharply with the frayed cuffs of her navy wool coat, a coat that had seen better seasons, much like her marriage. Across the mahogany table sat Ethan Sterling. He checked his Rolex Submariner for the third time in 2 minutes, a gesture of calculated impatience that Sarah knew better than the back of her own hand. "Sarah, please." Ethan sighed, the sound dripping with patronizing exhaustion. "We've been here for 2 hours. Just sign the papers. Jessica is waiting for me downstairs, and we have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin at 7. The mention of her name Jessica felt like a physical blow, a sharp intake of breath in a room devoid of oxygen. Jessica LeClaire, the 24-year-old PR intern who had invigorated Ethan's life according to the tabloids. The woman who was currently sitting in the passenger seat of the Porsche Sarah had helped pick out, waiting to celebrate the end of Sarah's life as she knew it. "The terms Ethan," Sarah said softly. Her voice was raspy, unused for days. "They aren't what we agreed on." Ethan's lawyer, Arthur Pendleton, a man with a smile like a shark sensing blood in the water, slid a fresh document across the table. "Mr. Sterling has been incredibly generous, Mrs. Sterling, considering you signed a prenuptial agreement 10 years ago that explicitly stated you would leave with what you came with. I came with a degree in architectural design and a trust fund that I liquidated to start Sterling Dynamics." Sarah said, her eyes finally lifting to meet Ethan's. "I poured every cent I had into your first prototype. I managed the books for 5 years from our kitchen table. I wrote the speeches that got you your first investors." Ethan laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table. The gold wedding band was already gone from his finger. "Sarah, look at yourself," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You were a great support, sure. You made coffee. You kept the calendar. But let's not rewrite history. I built the engine. I made the deals. You've been a housewife for the last 5 years. You're tired. You're obsolete." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something hastily and tore it out, sliding it on top of the legal documents. "Here," Ethan said. $50,000. That's on top of the alimony, which terminates in 12 months. It's enough to get a condo in Jersey or somewhere quiet. Somewhere you can figure out who you are without me." Sarah looked at the check. $50,000. It was an insult. It was less than what he had spent on Jessica's birthday bracelet last week, a charge Sarah had seen on the credit card statement before he cut her access. "I don't want your charity, Ethan," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a rage she was trying desperately to suppress. "It's not charity, it's a severance package," Ethan sneered, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. "Take it. Sign the papers. Or Arthur here will drag this out in court until that $50,000 is eaten up by legal fees and you're left sleeping in a shelter. Don't be stupid, Sarah. You're not a fighter. You never were. You're just nice." Nice. The word hung in the air like a curse. She had been nice when she forgave his first affair. She had been nice when he missed her mother's funeral for a business trip. She had been nice while he slowly, methodically stripped her of her confidence, her career, and her identity, until she was just Ethan Sterling's wife. Sarah picked up the pen. The weight of it felt heavy, like lead. She looked at Ethan one last time. He wasn't looking at her. He was texting on his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. He was already gone. He had moved on to the champagne and the accolades, and the younger woman convinced that Sarah would just fade away into the beige background of suburbia. She signed. The scratch of the pen on paper was the loudest sound in the room. "Good girl," Ethan said, snatching the papers before the ink was even dry. He didn't say goodbye. He simply turned and walked out the glass doors, Arthur trailing behind him like a loyal dog. Sarah sat alone in the conference room for a long time. She watched the rain streak the glass. She felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't the heartbreak she expected. It wasn't the crushing weight of depression she had feared. It was lighter, colder. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down 45 stories to the street below. She saw Ethan run out to his silver Porsche under an umbrella held by the valet. She saw the passenger door open and a blonde woman lean out to kiss him. Sarah touched the cold glass. "You think I'm broken, Ethan," she whispered to the empty room. "You think I'm obsolete." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. It was old, worn at the corners. It contained 10 years of ideas she had shared with him, and ideas she had kept for herself. Sketches, algorithms, market strategies that she had developed late at night while he was asleep. She wasn't leaving with nothing. She was leaving with the one thing Ethan Sterling couldn't buy, steal, or fake. She was leaving with her brain. "Enjoy the dinner," she murmured, turning her back on the city. "It's the last expensive meal you're going to enjoy for a very long time." The apartment in Queens was a far cry from the penthouse on Park Avenue. The radiator clanked like a dying engine, and the view was of a brick wall in an alleyway that smelled of wet cardboard and old grease. But to Sarah, it was a sanctuary. For the first 3 months, she did exactly what Ethan thought she would do. She vanished. She changed her number. She cut her hair, trading the long, high-maintenance blonde waves Ethan loved for a sharp, dark brunette bob that framed her face and highlighted the intensity of her eyes. She lived off rice beans and the meager settlement money, hoarding every dollar for what came next. She wasn't mourning. She was planning. The walls of her small living room were covered in news clippings, stock printouts, and architectural blueprints. In the center of the chaos was a whiteboard with the single name written in red marker: Julian Thorpe. Julian Thorpe was a legend on Wall Street, but a ghost in society. He was a billionaire venture capitalist known for 2 things: his ruthlessness in acquiring distressed assets and his absolute hatred for the public eye. He hadn't been photographed in 5 years. He was the titan of tech, but rumors swirled that he was looking to move into aerospace and defense, the exact sector Ethan's company Sterling Dynamics was currently trying to monopolize. Sarah knew something nobody else did. She knew why Julian Thorpe had gone into hiding. 6 years ago, before Ethan became arrogant, Sarah had anonymously consulted on a project for Thorpe's charitable foundation. She had fixed a critical flaw in their supply chain logistics for a disaster relief project in Sudan. She had never given her name, only a handle: Architect Zero. It was a long shot. A Hail Mary pass into the dark. She sat at her second-hand laptop, the screen glowing blue in the dim room. She opened an encrypted email server and typed a subject line: subject, the flaw in the Project Icarus protocol. Project Icarus was Ethan's flagship project, a new drone navigation system that was supposed to revolutionize the industry. It was the reason Sterling Dynamics' stock was soaring. It was also a lie. Sarah knew it because she had done the initial math, and she knew exactly where Ethan had cut corners to rush the launch. The system was unstable in high-altitude frost. It would fail. It was a ticking time bomb. She typed a summary of the flaw, attached the corrected mathematical proof, and signed it Architect Zero. She sent it to Julian Thorpe's private encrypted intake address, an address she had memorized years ago from a brief correspondence. Then she waited. 3 days passed. Silence. Sarah paced the small apartment, doubt gnawing at her. Had he changed his email? Was he dead? Was she crazy? On the 4th night, her laptop pinged. A single email appeared in her inbox. No subject line, just a location and a time. Hangar 4, Teterboro Airport. Midnight. Come alone. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dressed in a black turtleneck and slacks, grabbed her leather notebook, and took the subway as far as it would go, then a cab to the airfield. The hangar was massive, smelling of jet fuel and ozone. A single Gulfstream G650 jet sat in the center, gleaming under the industrial floodlights. Standing at the base of the stairs was a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit without a tie. His hair was silver fox gray, swept back, and his face was etched with lines of deep concentration. He leaned on a black cane with a silver handle. Though he didn't seem to need it for support, it looked more like a weapon. Julian Thorpe. Sarah walked toward him, the sound of her heels echoing on the concrete. She stopped 10 feet away. Julian studied her, his eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't smile. Architect Zero, he said. His voice was deep, resonant, and incredibly calm. I expected a team, or a defecting engineer, not a woman who looks like she's ready to burn down the city. Fire cleanses, Sarah replied evenly, holding his gaze. Mr. Thorpe, thank you for meeting me. You found a flaw in Sterling's navigation gyro, Julian said, tapping the cane on the ground. My analysts spent a month looking at that tech and found nothing. You tore it apart in 3 pages of calculus. Who are you? My name is Sarah Vance, she said. I was the co-founder of Sterling Dynamics, though my name was never on the incorporation papers. I designed the original architecture for the system you're looking at, and I know exactly how to dismantle it. Julian's eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized the name. Vance, you're Ethan Sterling's ex-wife, the one the tabloids said had a nervous breakdown. The tabloids say you're a vampire who sleeps in a hyperbaric chamber, Sarah countered. People say a lot of things. For the first time, a flicker of a smile touched Julian's lips. It was a dangerous smile. True? So, Mrs. Vance, or Miss Vance, I assume, why bring this to me? Why not the press? Why not short the stock yourself? I don't have the capital to short the stock effectively, Sarah said, stepping closer. And the press is fickle. I don't want a scandal, Mr. Thorpe. I want a takeover. Ethan Sterling stole 10 years of my life and my intellectual property. He built a glass castle on a foundation I laid. I want to be the one who pulls the rug out. And you want me to be the money, Julian concluded. I want you to be the face, Sarah corrected. Ethan fears you. If you start buying up his debt, he'll panic. He'll make mistakes. And when he's desperate, he'll look for a savior. I want us to be there when he reaches out his hand. Julian stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. He was assessing her, not just her intelligence, which she had already proven, but her resolve. He saw the hunger in her. He saw the cold, hard steel that had replaced the nice housewife. I'm looking to acquire a defense firm, Julian said slowly. Sterling Dynamics is the prize, but it's messy. I'll clean it, Sarah said. I know where the bodies are buried. I know the offshore accounts. I know the inflated R&D budgets. And what do you want in return? Money, a seat on the board. Sarah shook her head. I want to be the CEO. When you buy the company, I run it. And I want to be the one to tell Ethan he's fired. Julian laughed then. It was a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed in the vast hangar. You're ambitious, Sarah. I like that. But ambition isn't enough. You've been out of the game. You've been living in his shadow. He stepped closer, towering over her. If we do this, you belong to the mission. No more hiding. No more wife in the background. I will give you the capital, the resources, and the cover. But you have to do the work. You have to become someone Ethan doesn't even recognize. Sarah straightened her spine. Ethan doesn't know me. He never did. He only knew the reflection of himself in my eyes. Julian nodded, impressed. He extended a hand. The Project Icarus Gala is in 6 months. Sterling is hosting it to launch the drone. That's our deadline. We dismantle him by then. Sarah took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and solid. 6 months, she agreed. Welcome to the dark side, Sarah, Julian said. Let's get you out of Queens. We have work to do. As they walked up the stairs to the jet, Sarah didn't look back at the rainy airfield. She was thinking of Ethan laughing in the lawyer's office. She imagined the look on his face in 6 months. Panic, she thought. Pure, unadulterated panic. It was going to be a beautiful thing to watch. The location was not a corporate office, but a sprawling, mist-shrouded estate on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. Blackwood Manor, Julian Thorpe's ancestral home, was a fortress of solitude where the Atlantic winds battered the stone walls, and the only internet connection was a secure military-grade satellite uplink. For Sarah, it was a boot camp for the soul. Again, Julian's voice cracked through the cold morning air. Sarah stood in the center of the muddy courtyard, holding a fencing foil. Her breath came in white puffs. Her legs burned, her arms shook, but she raised the blade. Opposite her was a fencing instructor Julian had flown in from Paris, a man who didn't care that she was exhausted. "You are hesitating," Julian observed from the stone bench, wrapped in a wool coat, watching her like a hawk. "You are waiting for him to strike so you can parry. That is a defensive strategy. That is the strategy of a wife trying to keep the peace. You are not a wife anymore. You are a CEO. Attack." Sarah lunged. This time she didn't wait. She visualized Ethan's face behind the instructor's mask. His smug grin, the way he dismissed her ideas, the way he looked at Jessica. She drove forward, the steel blade flexing, and landed a solid hit on the instructor's chest protector. "Good." Julian nodded. "But you're still angry. Anger is messy. Anger makes you impulsive. I need you cold, Sarah. I need you to be ice." Over the next 4 months, Sarah Vance ceased to exist. In her place, a new woman was forged. Julian didn't just give her resources. He gave her an education in the dark arts of high finance. They spent nights in the Manor's library, surrounded by screens glowing with market data from Tokyo, London, and New York. Ethan is leveraging the company based on the projected success of Project Icarus, Sarah explained one evening, pointing to a complex graph she had built. He's taking out mezzanine debt, high-interest short-term loans to pay for the raw materials. He's betting everything that the launch will spike the stock price, allowing him to refinance. Julian swirled his scotch, his eyes gleaming. "And who holds that debt?" "Currently, a consortium of banks in Zurich," Sarah said. She tapped a key, bringing up a new window. "But the debt is tradable. If we create a shell corporation, we can buy the debt packages. If we own his debt, we own his leverage." "Do it," Julian commanded, "but use a name he won't recognize." Sarah typed in the name of the shell company, Nemesis Holdings. It was too on the nose, she knew, but she allowed herself this one small, poetic justice. While Sarah sharpened her mind and body in Scotland, New York was beginning to feel the heat. Ethan Sterling was pacing his corner office, the panoramic view of Central Park offering him no solace. His suit jacket was thrown over a chair, his tie loosened. Jessica LeClaire sat on the leather sofa, scrolling through Instagram, popping gum. "Babe, you promised we'd go to the Hamptons this weekend." Jessica whined, not looking up from her phone. "The gala is in 2 months. I need a tan." "Not now, Jessica," Ethan snapped, slamming his hand on his desk. Jessica jumped, looking more annoyed than frightened. "God, you're so stressed lately. What is the big deal? It's just a drone." "It's not just a drone," Ethan yelled. He ran a hand through his hair, which was showing premature gray at the temples. "It's the company. It's my legacy. And right now the navigation system is drifting. The gyroscope fails at 30,000 feet. We're bleeding cash trying to fix it, and my lead engineer just quit." He didn't tell her the rest. He didn't tell her that he had received a notification that morning that his primary loans had been sold to a private equity firm he'd never heard of, Nemesis Holdings. The new debt holders were demanding an audit. An audit would reveal that he had moved funds from the R&D budget to pay for the penthouse renovations and Jessica's new car. Ethan walked to the window. He felt a phantom limb sensation. Usually when things got this bad, he would go home and vent to Sarah. Sarah would listen. Sarah would make him tea. Sarah would quietly, without credit, look at the problem and say, "Have you tried recalibrating the sensor array?" And she would be right. He missed her brain. He realized with a sickening jolt that he had fired his most valuable employee and divorced her. "Call the headhunter," Ethan barked at his intercom. "Get me the best systems architect in the country. I don't care what it costs." Miles away across the ocean, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a forwarded alert from the headhunter agency she was monitoring. She looked at Julian. "He's looking for a replacement for me." Julian smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Let's make sure he hires the wrong one." The transformation was complete. Sarah's hair was now a sleek, sharp bob dyed a deep midnight black. Her wardrobe had shifted from soft pastels to structured power suits in charcoal navy and blood red. She moved differently. She didn't walk. She glided with predatory intent. It was time for the first direct strike. Ethan was hosting a private demonstration for key investors at a remote testing range in the Nevada desert. It was a critical moment. He needed to prove that the Icarus prototype worked to secure the next tranche of funding. Sarah and Julian watched the live stream from a private suite in Las Vegas, just 50 miles away. "Is the Trojan in place?" Julian asked. "Yes," Sarah replied, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "I still have the backdoor administrative codes to the server. Ethan changed the passwords, but he didn't change the root directory architecture. He's lazy." On the screen, they watched Ethan standing on a platform in the desert wearing tactical sunglasses and a headset. Behind him were generals from the Pentagon and venture capitalists. "Gentlemen," Ethan's voice came through the audio feed, sounding confident. "What you are about to see is the future of autonomous surveillance. Project Icarus is unjammable, untraceable, and precise to within a millimeter." He signaled the launch. The drone, a sleek black triangle, lifted off the runway with a hum. It ascended rapidly, disappearing into the blue sky. "Target acquisition in 3, 2, 1, Ethan announced. Sarah watched the telemetry data on her screen. She saw the drone lock onto the target vehicle, an old tank parked a mile away. "Now," Sarah whispered. She pressed a single key. She didn't crash the drone. That would be too obvious. Instead, she injected a micro-latency into the video feed being sent back to the investors' screens. It was a delay of only 0.5 seconds. But in the world of high-speed defense tech, half a second was a lifetime. On the screen in the desert, the video feed stuttered, the image pixelated. For 3 seconds, the screens went black before coming back online. "Just a minor bandwidth issue," Ethan stammered on the feed, tapping his headset. "It's the desert heat affecting the local relay." "It's not the heat," Sarah said to the monitor. "It's the code." Then she executed the second command. She altered the altimeter reading by 10%. The drone thought it was higher than it was. "Commencing landing sequence," Ethan said. The drone descended, but because its data was wrong, it came in too hot. It didn't crash, but it slammed onto the runway with a violence that snapped the landing gear. The $20 million prototype skidded across the asphalt, sparks flying before coming to a grinding halt, with a wing bent at a sickening angle. Silence descended on the Nevada test site. Sarah watched Ethan's face. He went pale. The generals were exchanging looks. One of them closed his notebook and stood up. "Ethan," the general said, his voice caught by the microphone, "that was a hard landing. If that had been a payload scenario, the ordnance would have detonated on the runway. It's a calibration error, Ethan pleaded, running after them. We can fix it in a day. Please don't pull the funding. Sarah closed the laptop. The room in Vegas was silent. He just lost the Pentagon contract, Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. His stock will drop 20% by tomorrow morning. 30, Sarah corrected. Because I'm going to leak the telemetry data to the tech blogs anonymously. They'll see the latency issues. Julian looked at her. For a moment there was something like fear in his eyes mixed with admiration. You really want to destroy him? No, Sarah said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. I want to buy him, and I want to buy him cheap. Back in New York, the fallout was catastrophic. Sterling Dynamics stock plummeted. The board of directors was calling for an emergency meeting. Ethan was drinking scotch at 10:00 a.m. It was sabotage, Ethan screamed at his IT director. Someone messed with the code. We checked the logs, Mr. Sterling, the IT director said, trembling. It looks like a system error. The code it just degraded. It's the base architecture. It's flawed. Who wrote the base architecture? Ethan demanded. The IT director hesitated. Your wife did, sir. Before she left. It was Sarah's code. Ethan froze. He sank into his chair. He couldn't blame Sarah publicly. If he admitted that his housewife had written the code for a billion-dollar defense project, he would look like a fraud. He had claimed credit for it all. He was trapped in his own lie. He picked up his phone. He had to fix this. He needed money. He needed a partner with deep pockets who could weather the storm and restore confidence. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number his lawyer had given him. The number for the representative of Thorpe Capital. Connect me to Julian Thorpe's office, Ethan said, his voice shaking. Tell him I'm ready to talk about the Gala sponsorship. The weeks leading up to the grand annual Gala, the event of the season, were a blur of desperation for Ethan. He was bleeding money. He had fired half his staff. Jessica had moved into the guest bedroom because she couldn't deal with his negative energy. He had secured a meeting with Julian Thorpe, but only virtually. The billionaire was notoriously reclusive. The screen in Ethan's office flickered to life. Julian Thorpe sat in a leather chair, his face partially in shadow. He looked every bit the titan of industry. Mr. Sterling, Julian said, you look tired. It's been a challenging quarter, Ethan admitted, trying to maintain his bravado. But Sterling Dynamics is resilient. We just need a strategic partner to get Icarus over the finish line. I've seen the footage from Nevada, Julian said dryly. It looked like an expensive paperweight. Ethan winced. Glitches. We've ironed them out. Look, Mr. Thorpe, if you invest now, you're buying in at the floor. The upside is massive. I am willing to discuss an injection of capital, Julian said slowly. $100 million. For a 40% stake. 40%, Ethan choked. That's hostile. That's the price of survival, Julian countered. Take it or leave it, but I have conditions. What conditions? 1, Julian said, holding up a finger. I want full access to your books. 2, I want seats on the board. And 3, I will be attending your gala personally to announce the partnership. I want the center table, and I will be bringing a guest. Ethan's eyes widened. Julian Thorpe at his gala. It would be the PR coup of the century. It would silence the critics instantly. Done, Ethan said quickly. Absolutely. Who is the guest I need to print the place cards? My new strategic advisor, Julian said vaguely. She prefers to remain anonymous until the night of the event. Just put Ms. V on the card. Ms. V, got it, Ethan said, writing it down. Mr. Thorpe, you won't regret this. I know I won't, Julian said. But you might. The screen went black. Ethan sat back, exhaling a breath he felt he'd been holding for months. He was saved. He had Julian Thorpe. The stock would bounce back. He could pay off Nemesis Holdings. He left the office early that day, feeling a spring in his step. He went to the luxury boutique on Fifth Avenue where Jessica was shopping for her gala dress. He found her in the dressing room wearing a gold sequined gown that was cut so low it was scandalous. "It's $15,000, Jessica said, twirling. "Do you like it?" Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. She was beautiful, yes, but her eyes were empty. There was no calculation, no depth. She didn't know what a mezzanine loan was. She didn't know how to code. She was just expensive noise. "It's fine," Ethan said, handing his credit card to the sales clerk. "Just buy it." "You're in a good mood," Jessica chirped, snatching the receipt. "Did you fix the drone thingy?" "I found a partner," Ethan said. "Julian Thorpe. He's coming to the gala." "Who?" Jessica asked, bored. Ethan sighed. "The richest man in the city, Jessica. Try to be charming." The night of the gala arrived with the force of a hurricane. The grand obsidian ballroom was decked out in silver and blue, the colors of sterling dynamics. The press was there in droves, flashing bulbs creating a strobe effect on the red carpet. Ethan stood at the entrance, sweating in his tuxedo. Jessica was on his arm, checking her reflection in her phone every 30 seconds. "Where is he?" Ethan muttered, checking his watch. "He's late." "Maybe he stood you up," Jessica said unhelpfully. "He won't. He signed the letter of intent," Ethan said. But panic was clawing at his throat. Then the murmurs started. It began at the street level and rippled up the grand staircase. The crowd parted. The photographers started shouting, their flashes going off in a frenzy that was blinding. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom had pulled up. The driver opened the back door. Julian Thorpe stepped out. He looked regal in a bespoke tuxedo, leaning lightly on his silver-handled cane. The crowd gasped. The recluse had returned. But then Julian turned back to the car and extended his hand. A woman stepped out. She was wearing emerald green silk. The dress was backless, draped perfectly over a body that was leaner, stronger, and more dangerous than the one Ethan remembered. Her hair was a sharp, dark helmet of gloss. She wore diamonds at her throat that glittered like ice. She took Julian's arm. She didn't look down at the carpet. She looked straight ahead. Her chin lifted, her eyes scanning the crowd with a terrifying familiarity. Ethan squinted. The woman looked like, but no. It couldn't be. "Who is that?" Jessica asked, her voice shrill with jealousy. "Is that a model?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't breathe. The couple ascended the stairs. They moved closer. The woman's gaze locked onto Ethan. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of the executioner. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice smooth, cultured, and devoid of the stuttering warmth of his ex-wife. "Sarah," Ethan whispered the word, strangling him. "It's Ms. Vance to you," she said softly. "And I believe we have a business meeting." The ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, but the gravitational center of the room had shifted entirely to table 1. Ethan Sterling sat there sweating through his custom tuxedo. To his right sat Jessica, who was aggressively stabbing at her lobster risotto, her mood souring with every minute that the cameras ignored her. To his left sat Julian Thorpe, the billionaire savior, eating with the calm precision of a surgeon. And directly across from Ethan sat Sarah. She hadn't touched her food. She was sipping sparkling water, watching him. It was unnerving. Every time Ethan looked up, he expected to see the nervous, apologetic woman he had divorced. Instead, he saw a stranger. She was engaging the CEO of Lockheed Martin in a debate about solid-state propulsion, her voice low and confident. The CEO was listening to her with rapt attention, nodding. "So," Ethan said, his voice too loud over the clinking silverware. "Sarah, you look well. I didn't know you knew Julian." Sarah turned her gaze to him. It felt like a spotlight hitting a deer. "There are a lot of things you didn't know, Ethan. You never asked. I see you spent that $50,000 on a makeover." Jessica interjected, snapping her gum. She looked Sarah up and down with disdain. Is that dress rented? The table went quiet. Julian Thorpe stopped chewing. He slowly turned his head to look at Jessica. His expression was one of mild curiosity, as if he were observing a talking insect. This dress, Julian said, his voice deep and smooth, is a custom Givenchy, and Ms. Vance didn't buy it. I bought it for her. I find that when one works with a genius, one should ensure they are draped in excellence. Jessica's mouth fell open. Ethan kicked her under the table. Right. Ethan laughed nervously. A genius. That's very kind of you, Julian. Sarah was always helpful. With the books. I wasn't talking about bookkeeping, Julian said, returning to his meal. Ethan felt a bead of sweat roll down his spine. He leaned in toward Sarah. Look, Sarah, he hissed, lowering his voice so the others wouldn't hear. I don't know what game you're playing shacking up with Thorpe to make me jealous. It's pathetic. If you wanted more money, you could have just asked. Sarah smiled. It was a terrifyingly genuine smile. I don't want your money, Ethan. I have my own now. Please, Ethan scoffed. You have a settlement check. That's not having money. That's survival mode. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. It was time for the keynote speech. Time for Ethan to announce the partnership that would save his skin. He stood up, buttoning his jacket, regaining his confidence. This was his arena. He grabbed the microphone and walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan boomed, his charisma switching on like a light bulb. Thank you for coming. Tonight we face a turning point. Sterling Dynamics has always been about pushing boundaries. We've had some turbulence recently. A few nervous chuckles from the audience. But turbulence is just proof that you're flying fast. Ethan continued. I am proud to announce that we are entering a new era, a partnership that will secure our future. Please welcome to the stage the man who believes in my vision, Mr. Julian Thorpe. The applause was thunderous. Julian stood up. He walked to the stage, taking the cane with him. He shook Ethan's hand firmly, then took the microphone. Ethan stepped back, beaming. He expected Julian to praise him. He expected Julian to announce the $100 million investment. Thank you, Julian said. The room went silent. I am indeed here to announce a restructuring of Sterling Dynamics. It is a company with great potential built on a foundation of brilliance. But recently that foundation has been neglected. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. I am not investing in Ethan Sterling, Julian said clearly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan took a half step forward. Julian, what are you? I am investing in the architect, Julian continued, ignoring him. The person who actually designed the Icarus Protocol. The person who wrote the code that this company has been running on for 10 years. The person who regrettably was forced out of her own creation. Julian turned to the table where Sarah sat. He extended a hand. Please welcome the new CEO of Sterling Dynamics, Ms. Sarah Vance. The silence was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. Sarah stood up. She didn't look surprised. She walked to the stage, the emerald silk flowing around her like water. She ascended the stairs and took the microphone from a stunned Julian. Ethan stood there frozen. Sarah, what is this? You can't be CEO. I own 51% of the voting stock. Sarah turned to him. She wasn't using the microphone yet. She spoke just to him, but in the silence the front row heard every word. Actually, Ethan, she said, you owned 51%, but you leveraged 30% of that as collateral for the mezzanine loans you took out last month to cover the R&D losses. Loans that were held by Nemesis Holdings. Ethan's face went gray. Nemesis. I know that name. They called in the debt yesterday. Yes, Sarah said. And since you couldn't pay the collateral, your stock forfeited to the lender. So, Ethan stammered. So, Nemesis owns it. Not you. Ethan. Sarah said, a pitying look in her eyes. Who do you think Nemesis is? She turned to the audience and raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah addressed the crowd, her voice strong, commanding, and unrecognizable from the woman who used to fetch coffee. "Effective immediately, Nemesis Holdings, my private equity firm backed by Mr. Thorpe, has acquired a controlling interest in Sterling Dynamics. Mr. Sterling has been relieved of his duties due to gross negligence and financial mismanagement." "You can't do this," Ethan screamed, lunging for the mic. Julian stepped in front of him, blocking him with the cane. Security guards, burly men in black suits, materialized from the shadows. "The board met an hour ago," Sarah continued, her voice unwavering. "They voted unanimously to remove the current leadership. We are pivoting. The Icarus flaw has been fixed, not by patching the hardware, but by restoring the original algorithm that was deleted 2 years ago. My algorithm." She gestured to the giant screen behind her. The logo of Sterling Dynamics appeared, but the tagline under it changed. It no longer read "Vision by Sterling." It read, "Designed by Vance." "Get him off my stage," Sarah said calmly to the security team. 2 guards grabbed Ethan by the arms. "Sarah!" Ethan yelled as he was dragged backward. "Sarah, I'm your husband. I built this. You're nothing without me. You're just a housewife." Sarah didn't even turn around. She watched the crowd. The applause started slowly, a few claps from the Lockheed CEO, and then it swelled. It became a roar. They weren't clapping for Ethan. They were clapping for the coup. They were clapping for the predator who had just eaten the prey. Jessica, realizing the ship was sinking, stood up from the table. She looked at Ethan being dragged away, then looked at the stage. She grabbed her purse and sprinted for the exit, not sparing Ethan a single glance. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces. She felt the warmth of the spotlight. It didn't burn. It felt like the sun after a long, cold winter. The morning sun that bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Dynamics did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh clinical illumination to the wreckage of the night before. The offices, usually buzzing with the chaotic energy of interns and junior analysts by 800 a.m., were struck by a heavy, suffocating silence. It was the silence of a kingdom that had just seen its king beheaded in the public square. Ethan Sterling sat alone in Conference Room B, the glass-walled enclosure near the elevator bank, famously known among the staff as the Fish Bowl. It was the room where Ethan had fired countless employees over the years, often enjoying the way the rest of the office could see the victim weeping while he remained impassive. Now the roles were reversed. Every employee who walked off the elevator cast a fleeting, terrified glance at the man inside, then hurried to their cubicle, keeping their head down. Ethan was still wearing his tuxedo from the gala. The collar was unbuttoned, the bow tie hung loose like a dead snake around his neck, and there was a dark stain of red wine on the white shirt front. He hadn't slept. He sat slumped in the ergonomic chair, staring at the polished oak table, his reflection looking back at him like a ghost. He looked aged, hollowed out, a man whose soul had been extracted along with his net worth. At 8:15 a.m. sharp, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The rhythm of the footsteps was different. It wasn't the frantic scurry of an assistant or the heavy plod of security. It was the rhythmic, sharp click-clack of heels that meant business. Sarah Vance stepped onto the floor. She was a vision of ice and steel. Gone was the emerald gown of the temptress. In its place was a pristine white architectural power suit that made her glow against the gray office backdrop. Her hair was swept back, severe and perfect. She held a single thin file folder in her hand. She didn't look at the employees who half stood to acknowledge her. She walked straight to the fishbowl. She opened the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the loudest noise in the room. Ethan looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red exhaustion. He tried to straighten his posture, a reflex of his old arrogance, but his body betrayed him. He just looked small. "Sarah," he croaked. His voice was ruined, likely from screaming into his pillow or a bottle of scotch the previous night. Sarah didn't sit immediately. She walked to the window looking out at the skyline that Ethan used to claim he owned. "It's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" she asked, her tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather and not the dismantling of his life. "The air is clearer today." "Stop it," Ethan whispered. "Just stop the act. You've had your fun. You humiliated me in front of the entire industry. Are you happy?" Sarah turned her face impassive. She sat down opposite him, placing the file folder on the table between them. She didn't slide it across yet. She kept her hand on it, possessing it. "Happiness isn't the metric I'm using, Ethan," she said calmly. "Efficiency is. And last night wasn't humiliation. It was a correction. The market corrects itself when an asset is overvalued. You were the overvalued asset. I built this company." Ethan slammed his hand on the table, though the impact was weak. "You can't just steal it with some legal trickery." "There was no trickery," Sarah replied, opening the folder. "It was a standard leveraged buyout of distressed debt. You know the terminology, Ethan. You used to use it to intimidate your competitors. Nemesis Holdings, my firm, purchased the mezzanine loans you took out to cover the Icarus failures. When the debt covenants were breached due to your liquidity crisis, we exercised our right to convert that debt into equity. Controlling equity." She slid a document toward him. It was thick-bound in heavy paper. "This is the separation agreement," she explained, her voice devoid of pity. "We are offering you a clean break. No lawsuits, no forensic accounting into your personal use of company funds for, let's call them, lifestyle enhancements. In exchange, you sign over your remaining voting rights and agree to a 5-year non-compete clause." Ethan stared at the document, the words blurred before his eyes. "Non-compete. You're banning me from the industry, this is all I know." "Then learn something else," Sarah said. "I had to." Ethan looked up, desperation clawing at his throat. "What about Jessica? Have you heard from her?" "She left the gala. I haven't seen her since. She has my car." Sarah's lips quirked slightly, a microscopic expression of amusement. "Ah, yes, Miss LeClaire. I'm afraid she didn't just leave Ethan. She evacuated. My security team monitored the company accounts this morning. It seems she tried to charge a first-class ticket to the Maldives on the corporate Amex at 2:00 a.m. Ethan blinked. "She what?" "The card was declined, of course," Sarah continued smoothly. "As for the car, the Porsche is a company lease. When she drove it out of the state, it triggered the GPS theft recovery protocol. I believe the New Jersey State Police pulled her over on the George Washington Bridge about 4 hours ago. She was arrested for grand theft auto. I imagine she's using her one phone call to find a lawyer not to call you." Ethan put his head in his hands. A low moan of absolute defeat escaped him. The younger woman, the trophy he had destroyed his marriage to acquire, had abandoned him the second the credit limit ran dry. "She took the jewelry, too," Sarah added, twisting the knife with surgical precision. "Though I suspect she'll find out soon enough that the diamonds you bought her last month were cubic zirconia. I saw the receipts in your personal file. You were really cutting corners everywhere, weren't you?" Ethan didn't answer. He was weeping silently, his shoulders shaking. It was a pathetic sight. 10 years of history, 10 years of Sarah supporting him, building him up, fixing his mistakes in the dark so he could shine in the light. All of it had led to this moment. Sarah reached into her purse. She pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. The edges were soft, worn from being carried in a pocket for months. It was the check for $50,000 he had thrown at her in the lawyer's office. She placed it on the table directly on top of the separation agreement. "You gave this to me to help me find myself," Sarah said softly. "You told me to buy a condo in Jersey. You told me I was obsolete." Ethan looked at the check. It was uncashed. "I don't need your charity, Ethan," she said. "I never did. I didn't take your money because I knew that one day I would buy you out with my own. Keep it. You're going to need it for a retainer. Arthur Pendleton isn't cheap, and since he works for me now, you'll need to find new counsel." Ethan stared at the check. It was the ultimate symbol of his failure. The money he thought was a fortune to her was now meaningless, loose change to the woman she had become. He looked up at her, his eyes searching her face for any trace of the woman who used to make him coffee and rub his shoulders after a long day. "Sarah, please, tell me the truth. Did you plan this from the day you left? Was our marriage just a long con to get the company?" Sarah stood up. She smoothed the front of her suit. She looked down at him, not with hatred, but with a distant, cold clarity. "I loved you, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "I loved you so much that I made myself small so you could feel big. I stayed in the shadows so you wouldn't be blinded by my light. I wrote the code, I fixed the books, and I let you take the bows. I didn't want the company, I just wanted my husband." She leaned in closer, her hand resting on the glass table. "But you didn't want a partner," she whispered. "You wanted a fan. And when I stopped clapping and started thinking, you discarded me. This wasn't a con, Ethan. This was a consequence. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. And in business, you don't get to make a second one." She turned and walked to the door. "Sarah," he called out, his voice cracking. "What am I supposed to do now?" She paused, her hand on the silver handle. She didn't look back. "Go find out who you are when you aren't Ethan Sterling, CEO," she said. "It's a terrifying journey. I suggest you start by learning how to make your own coffee." She opened the door and walked out. The office outside was still quiet, but the energy had shifted. As Sarah walked past the rows of cubicles, heads didn't turn away in fear anymore. They turned toward her in awe. The engineers, the analysts, the secretaries, they looked at her with a mixture of terror and absolute respect. They knew who the alpha was now. Waiting by the elevator bank was Julian Thorpe. He was leaning against the wall, looking effortlessly powerful in a charcoal suit. He wasn't on his phone. He was waiting for her. When he saw her approach, he straightened up. He looked past her through the glass walls of the fishbowl at the broken man weeping at the table. Julian's expression was unreadable, but he gave a single slow nod. "Is the transaction complete?" Julian asked, his voice low. "The papers are signed," Sarah said, falling into step beside him. "He's finished." "Good," Julian said. He pressed the button for the elevator. "The board is waiting in the penthouse. We have a lot of work to do. The stock is up 18% in pre-market trading. The world wants to know what Sarah Vance is going to do next." The elevator doors opened. It was empty. A blank canvas. Sarah stepped inside. She felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in a decade. The weight of Ethan, of his ego, of her own silence, it was all gone. "Let's not keep them waiting," Sarah said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. As the doors closed, shutting out the sight of the fishbowl and the man trapped inside it, Sarah didn't look down. She looked up at the digital numbers climbing higher and higher. She was ascending. And this time, there was no glass ceiling to stop her. The fall of Ethan Sterling became a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms of New York for decades. It was a story not just about greed, but about the fatal error of underestimating the quiet ones. Sarah Vance didn't just reclaim her life. She redefined what it meant to be powerful. She proved that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting commands, but the one who knows how the machine works because she built it. She taught the world that silence is not weakness, and that a woman scorned doesn't just get mad, she gets ownership. The check for $50,000 remained uncashed on the table, a paper tombstone for a marriage that died of arrogance. Sarah never looked back, for she knew that the view from the top was far better than the view from the sidelines. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and the ultimate comeback, please hit the like button. It helps the channel immensely. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Ethan deserved a second chance, or did he get exactly what was coming to him? Thanks for watching.